Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's first speaker, Liza Walworth, Vice President with Ipsos's Qualitative Team. Liza, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks everybody for joining. My name is Liza Walworth. I am an anthropologist, ethnographer, and filmmaker, and am the founder of Ipsos's U.S. Ethnography Center of Excellence. And I'm super thankful that you've all joined us today to hear a little bit about a favorite project of mine, which I've been working on for a number of months with my partner, Jesse. So Jesse, why don't you introduce yourself before we get going?
Thanks, Liza. And you couldn't have said it better. This is, I think, some really nice work that we'll share with you today, some work that we're really excited about, and we think has really given some nice insights to the clients that we work with. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Jesse Itzkowitz. I'm Senior Vice President of our North American behavioral science practice. My background is as a consumer psychologist, where I was actually a marketing professor teaching that for about 8 years. So this is some really nice work that blends kind of the two specialty areas that you've heard about, both ethnography as well as behavioral science. We have a lot to share today. Certainly, as you have questions, please post that in the chat box. If we have some time at the end, we'd love to address them. But with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Liza. Let's take it away.
Awesome. All right. So we're here today to talk a little bit about 2021 and how to plan for it. And we thought it would be worth sharing some of what we've been up to in terms of the very many complicated, overlapping, and sort of tense components of 2020. Things for this project started in full throttle back in May, but for all of us, we probably started to experience the impact of COVID in late February or March. And while some folks might have thought, gosh, this is going to be a couple weeks, things kept on trucking. And we've had the political and cultural divisions that were in existence before become amplified and exacerbated. We've had civil unrest. We've just had so many things that have caused this ongoing flux, which in turn has impacted beliefs and behaviors for Americans. And the lucky thing about working at Ipsos is that we are a global entity, and the Behavioral Science Center that Jesse is a part of, as well as Strategy 3 and a few other units within Ipsos, started to plot out what might come based on what we were seeing in China and Europe, those areas that were experiencing COVID and lockdowns earlier than we were here in the US. So we had some sense of some of the anxiety, the concept of the future, the priorities that were being made manifest in China and other places. And so Ipsos created the Ipsos Pandemic Adaptability Continuum. This was a combination of the thinking of those groups I've mentioned, plus the WHO pandemic profile, the Kubler-Ross model of grief, and we plotted out how we thought things might move stage by stage in terms of COVID here in the States, and then of course more broadly around the globe. And the first thing to understand about this IPAC is that the reaction to this level of newness, of tension, of uncertainty, when fear comes in or change is forced upon you, this was disruption at a level that many of us have never seen in our lifetimes before. Things don't move in a straight line. They go up and down, emotions go up and down. But the thought for some was that we would start to move forward, not in a straight line, but at least we'd keep going forwards. And what we saw in certain areas outside of the US, and we'll tell you a little bit about what happened in the US, is that how humans react to COVID, to cultural unease, to societal tensions, to all the things that 2020 has thrown at us, is not necessarily a straight line. And we'll learn a little bit more about Kelly in a moment, but he's a great example of how this continuum can have progress that goes forward and then loop back. So he's one of our American Flux participants, And back in late March, early April, he wasn't really taking things super seriously. He was in exploratory mode. He was a bit bored. He started cooking at home because he couldn't go out the way that he normally would. He was finding recipes online, becoming a bit more adventuresome with what he was attempting at home compared to what he used to cook. But he was really looking forward to things reopening in Arizona. And once they reopened, he got a haircut. He started going back to restaurants. He was going to book a flight to spend his summer in San Diego, like he normally does at his apartment there. Kept eating out. This is towards the 10th of June. And just days later, canceled his flight to San Diego, started wearing a mask, every single moment he could, even while filming for us. And, that diet that he had started as part of this cooking effort began to slide. So he actually moved back into a more sort of prep mode and with greater fear and urgency than where he started because of the spiking numbers in Arizona and the realization that this is real and I need to take care of myself. He's 63, and while he doesn't really think that he's going to be here for another 20 years, he thought that perhaps he should be a little more careful about himself, but also be careful in terms of other people. He really started to think about those around him, his roommates. He lives with two other 60-somethings, and he has a very, dear group of friends within his metro area. So fast forward a little bit, he has to go back on the diet because he let it slip. He eventually flies to Mexico. He's become at least a little bit more comfortable with the notion of travel. He's still wearing a mask, but he's not totally sure of, how he's going to navigate what he's thinking of as a new normal. He doesn't know what he's going to do for Thanksgiving. He had plans to go to Hawaii. He is starting to feel as though there's no true or credible information out there about COVID, about, the best courses of action. He's still wearing his mask, but some, concern has crept in, like, are we really going to do this forever? And is this helping me? So he's sort of been all over the map. And he is just one of a number of people who we've been spending time with in a special digital way as part of America in Flux. When the IPAC was being formed back in March, we started a global study, and then I also started to devise a domestic study because I felt as though what we were seeing in other countries wasn't necessarily going to be the case here in the United States. There are many, many differences based on region, just based on how our healthcare system is set up, based on politics. There are many different elements to what makes us America that meant I thought this a prime time to capture behavioral change in action, see what the impact on belief might be, and sort of push the envelope in how the Ethnography Center of Excellence utilizes digital ethnography. Typically, we would, in most of our projects, spend a full day, 10, 12 hours with someone as an ethnographer and videographer, just me and my camera, spending time with a person, their household, their roommates, going wherever they go, observing, participating in whatever it is that they did. But with digital ethnography, we were able to have greater geographic spread within, a consistent period of time. We were able to follow people for months. We were able to, as much as we could, replicate what makes in-person ethnography so special, that relationship and rapport, the range of moments of situations that you're trying to capture. In fact, we're able to go more places with them, at different day parts, different days of the week, rather than visiting across a number of days. So we were able to see through this smartphone that all of our participants have, but not everybody has. That's one of the cons to this sort of work, is the tech that it requires. But for these 25 households in 5 different states, we were able to, through getting to know them, assign a number of different tasks, requests. Oh, you're going to go do that? You mind just sharing some video of this? Or set up your camera, and oh, by the way, hold it like this, not like this. Set up your camera to shoot while you guys are getting ready for dinner, having dinner, cleaning up after dinner. When you venture out after the lockdown in your area is is relaxed. So we trained our participants to become documentarians and had phone calls with them each week. And from mid-May became, somewhat digitally embedded in their lives. And so this allowed us to see IPAC made manifest in all of these different ways. And it has been a pretty extraordinary trip. I do want to share some of this with you in terms of 3 of our participants, one of whom is Kelly, who you've met. We're going to show a little bit of his journey in terms of IPAC and where he sort of was going all over. You will also meet Brandis, who, let me go back, I can show you her. Brandis is in the mask in the second row. She is a nurse, and despite being a nurse, she really didn't want to wear a mask outside of work. She is a single mom, so there was a lot of time with her son in Georgia when they couldn't really go many places. They were able to do a lot of new things together that they normally didn't have time to do, and that was great. And then it wasn't as fun anymore, and they started getting takeout. But she goes through a journey as well in terms of wrapping her arms around COVID and taking care of herself and trying to choose what situations she does or does not want to put herself in. And then finally, we have Allison. Where are you, Allison? She is all the way over on the third row. She is in Seattle. She was really boxed in by the mandates and regulations, particularly in the area of downtown where she was, and slowly was able to get out and eat like she really enjoys to do. And they kept going out and they kept going out. They were able to go camping. They started doing church services in person as soon as they could. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but things got exciting for her family as well. So we're going to start with a little bit of video of some of our families before moving into what we've learned from them that will come to bear in terms of how we think about next year.
And Liza, while you bring that up, I just want to comment, as a tool, I was so impressed with, the way that digital ethnography allowed us to not only see through the eyes of our participants, right, as they're kind of filming the movie of their own lives, but also to hear from them as well. And I thought we were able to get such rich meaning from the narrations that they gave. So it was not only them selecting what was meaningful for them, what they wanted to share, what they were doing, the frictions, the benefits, the crying, the laughter that we've all experienced over the past 6 months, but then to hear what that meant to them, to hear their reaction to it, the anticipation of that, the letdowns of some of the experiences that people have, and even kind of rethinking some of their own beliefs as it related not only to COVID, but also Black Lives Matter and their entire experience of the pandemic was something that was just fascinating from a B-side perspective. So I know we'll get to that, so why don't we get a chance to hear from them in their own voices now?
Yeah, right. So this video is about a little over 3 minutes long. If you have phoned in, you're going to want to turn the speakers on your computer because that's where the audio is going to play from. And let's all cross our fingers because I need to move to a slightly different platform to play this for you. So IPAC as demonstrated by our people. All right.
I'm certainly enjoying cooking, which I didn't used to do a lot. Trying this meal that I watched on YouTube. I'm a YouTube cook right now, at least I have been. This is a timeline of this past summer, the last few months. You can see I've just been in Phoenix. Here's my timeline from last summer. So my summer's completely upside down this year. I would usually be in Southern California where it's cooler. I don't plan on getting on an airplane for at least 2 or 3 months. It doesn't seem to be subsiding, especially here in Arizona. The biggest frustration over the last few months is what to believe, what not to believe. I've been disappointed in the federal government response, particularly disappointed in the state government response. It's been a confusing time. It's been a very confusing time. I went on a diet, lost about 20 pounds. I've been off that diet and I've gained it all back. And as of September 1st, yesterday, I'm back on the diet.
We're at home a lot more, so we play games, we watch movies, been cooking together a lot more, my son and I. It is Wednesday, about 1:40 in the afternoon. I'm going to make some cookies. The break and bake time. Yeah, they look done. Look good, too.
Yes, they do.
We do have our mask on, mainly because everyone else does, so it just felt weird without it. It was hot, it was crowded, and I was just miserable. So I got a few things that I really, really needed, and I was like, I'll come back. I honestly think that no one knew that it would go on this long. I think everyone thought maybe a week or two, but here we are, still going strong. I think it's going to get much worse before it gets better.
During the closures, we really did get a little down, and I would say even a little depressed in the beginning. And so when we got the stimulus check and the money flowing in, we were like, why not? Let's go shopping. We really were shopping out of just our feelings, and we regret it now. This is definitely great for my mental health. You know, you don't realize when you're in a situation how badly you need to get out of it until you're out of it and away from chaos, away from COVID-19, away from all the protests and all the negative media. And then you're out here and you realize, wow, I really needed a break. I'm wondering about my daughter's schooling. She's a senior, and if she's going to be going to school. I'm wondering if we're going to stop wearing these masks. It's just kind of everything's up in the air. We had some family members who were not feeling well, who did not speak up. And when they were around us, it just was like wildfire. I had to be at the ER twice. You could hear stories from this person or that person, but when you know somebody who has it or you've had it, it just becomes more personal.
Okay, let's see if I can take us back.
I'm always trying to decide which part of that clip I like more, if it's Allison's perfect cast into the water, or if it's Brandis's son putting his thumb right into the freshly baked cookies.
Or when he realizes that, oh, I don't have my mask up, and mom's filming, I gotta put my mask up. Oops. Yeah, he's a favorite for sure. All right,
So I think, there's a lot that we already knew as we were kind of embarking on this project, right? And I think at a very superficial level, we were all very much aware that there were changes in people's behaviors, right? We couldn't go out to restaurants. We couldn't have our friends over. Schools were closed. We're cooking more. So I think a lot of those were kind of obvious things that certainly we documented as part of our work, but we wanted to kind of think about how has this fundamentally changed us, not only as Americans, not only as consumers, but us as humans and as people? Like, in what ways has this kind of massive disruption that we're all experiencing affected our psyche and who we are? And so really what we wanted to do was to go a little bit deeper. And, throughout the course of our work, we brought in a ton of different psychological principles to really help us understand what people were doing and give some reasons behind a lot of the say-do differences that we were witnessing. But these were two that we came back to over and over again. And I think a lot of it relates to what you saw with Kelly's pandemic journey, what you heard from him in the video, and what you heard from Brandeis and Allison as well. And that's really this question of uncertainty, this question of figuring things out, of starting anew, of planning what to do next and how to do it, what we want to do, what we're allowed to do, what we don't want to do, and what we're trying to avoid. And so that really kind of helped us focus in on these two. And so the first, for those of you who've had any experience to behavioral science before, you've probably heard of fast and slow thinking, or system 1 versus system 2 thinking. And this was interesting to us. We have a lot of evidence kind of talking about how when people are experiencing fear, do they shut down their mental processes, or do they actually exacerbate those and think a little bit more? So for those of you who haven't heard of this before, System 1, this is our kind of older evolutionary, I kind of call it our animal brain. It's what's kept us alive from our time on the savannah all the way up until today. It's very much hardwired. It's part of our perceptual and sensory system. It's really good at incorporating a lot of information at once. How do I make sense of what's happening all around me in a very, very quick way that doesn't require a lot of my attention? Now, the problem with System 1 is although it can do a lot at once, it sometimes makes mistakes. And it's where a lot of the cognitive biases that we've heard of and learned about really kind of occur. Now, on the other end of the continuum is System 2 processing. And this is, what we like to think of as, the newer part of our brain. It lives in our prefrontal cortex, right at the very, very front, the newest part of our brain to evolve. And it's really thought to have existed as a function of us being social creatures and having to plan and coordinate and kind of share information with other people. And so whereas System 1 can do a lot all at once but makes mistakes, System 2 is a lot more focused. It's deliberate. It's kind of focused on a much smaller set of information. It's very low bandwidth. And whereas System 1 just wants things to be easy, System 2 wants them to be accurate. So it's where a lot of our planning takes place, where a lot of our control takes place as well. And I think what was interesting for us was just to see the different ways that this played out with some of our participants. So I love, this clip of Allison that we all saw. Allison and her family were experiencing some severe financial hardships at the beginning of the pandemic. And for them, it was interesting. They were actually engaging quite a bit of System 2 thought, thinking about planning their finances. What do I do? Do we track it? How do I make sure that I'm where I need to be? But then something happened. Something happened to a lot of us. We all got our stimulus checks. And this kind of led to a lot of System 1 behavior by the people that we saw. And so this is a Nobel Prize winning idea by Richard Thaler of mental accounting. And the whole idea is when we have a windfall, when we get money that we didn't expect, whether it's from a gift, that $20 that we find in the back of the jeans that came out of the dryer, or even in the case of a government check, we don't necessarily equate that to, oh, I should use this to pay off a debt. I should use this to take care of my responsibilities. Yes, this is going to solve the fact that I can't make my mortgage this month. Instead, we view it as a kind of separate category. And so what we saw a lot of were people using this new flux of income to go on that splurge, right? And so we saw people buying things ranging from electronics and technology to clothing purchases to even some more of those traditional recessionary indulgences like lipstick and makeup, those small things that can help us feel, a little bit more luxurious in our times of need. And what I thought was interesting about this is, it really showed this System 1 pattern of people trying to not only make themselves feel better, but I think to another extent, gain some agency over their own lives. As the rest of the world was crashing around them, how do they get a sense of control? And we saw a lot of this coming through consumption, right? I can buy this, I can do this, I can be this person now that I have an opportunity to. And so those are things that we'll come back to, but is a nice reflection of System 1 behavior. I think System 2 behavior, this is something, we normally say people are less engaged with. People typically only engage in effortful thought when we have the ability and the motivation to do so. For a lot of our participants, this stimulus check or even kind of their finances during lockdown and beyond have really taken a hit. And so for them, people who might have been a little bit more spendthrift in nature focused, and they started to track. They started to pay attention. They started to kind of plan about what they needed to do next. And what was interesting was this wasn't only about their finances, but also extended into a lot of other elements of their lives as well. So even thinking about their shopping behavior, what might have been an autopilot thing for us to go to the grocery store was now very much a System 2 kind of job. How do I make sure I'm safe? How do I make sure I get all the things that I need to do? How do I make sure that this giant frozen pizza that I've never bought before will actually fit into my freezer when I get home, right? So, there's a lot of this kind of engagement with thought that we saw in a way that, we hadn't beforehand. And I think it was very interesting for us to see what were things that people normally did on autopilot that had now become a little bit more deliberative and a little bit more rational? And then what were the things that were kind of like should be rational or should be deliberative, where we saw people really engaging in that system one, indulgent, immediate behavior? And we saw quite a bit of that with shopping behavior, with financial behaviors, how they chose to spend time with their family and entertain themselves, as well as cooking at home. Now, the other interesting mindset that we came into was something called regulatory fit or regulatory focus. And this, I think, is best described as maybe our disposition or outlook. Crudely, we can almost think of this as like an optimist versus pessimist, although that might be a little bit too simplistic. But this really relates to our personalities and the way that we view the world around us. And, many of us are promotion oriented, and we tend to look for opportunities and successes and achievements. When we think about products, it's going to be, what does this enable me to do? And how do I best get to where I want to in terms of the goals that I have? And I think, if you're going to relate this to a TV character like Michael Scott from The Office, he's there selling paper every day, but he's going to look for the way to make this as much fun as he possibly can. Now, on the other side of this are people who are prevention oriented, and they're risk averse. Instead of looking for opportunities, they're looking for ways to have control. They're looking for ways to take care of their duties and their obligations. They want to protect things. They're not really interested in making their lives better. They really want to make sure that things don't get worse. How do I maintain the status quo from where I am right now? So going back to The Office, like, this certainly isn't Michael Scott, probably a little bit more like Toby. What are the rules? What are the regulations? How do I make sure that I'm checking all of the boxes that are there? And I think what was interesting is not only did we see kind of chronic differences between some of the people that we were able to live with for the past 6 months, but also situational differences in the ways that they approached, whether it was cooking, shopping, Black Lives Matter and politics, or even engaging with their neighbors and family. And so if you go to the next slide, I think, this is one that we all feel. And I think as we, watched people re-enter at various times across the nation, this was something that really stood out. For those people that were prevention oriented, hypervigilant towards these cues about safety and hygiene. And so a lot of them, even when they were going out to enjoy, they were very much, hey, like, is this safe? There's a lot of things here. I'm getting the plastic cutlery instead of the other ones. There's all these signs. There's all of this single serve stuff. But on the other hand, it made them feel safe. It made them feel secure. It made them feel okay that they could re-enter some of their parts of life that they had abandoned before. Now, on the other side of this were people that were prevention oriented. I think Jaron, who we'll talk about again later, is a great example of this. And remember, he's thinking about opportunities and successes and achievement. What are the new things that I can do? What is the excitement that I can do? And again, it's not always a function of where we are in life as much as it is a function of who we are. During this time, Jaron's life was extremely disrupted. He traveled a lot for his job in finance, not available to do that. He moved his home, right? Not easy to do. His finances were impacted, and he had a special needs son who has now had to take his learning at home. So a lot of kind of disruption, not discounting that, but his outlook was very different. Great videos of him becoming this YouTube explorer chef. We made lobster for the first time, and so I'm an expert, kind of almost. And so this constant like optimism and viewing of how do I take this really awful situation and use that as a way to develop new skills for myself, new opportunities for my family, new ways for me to connect with my business partners and my clients was just fascinating to see. And I think, where I'll hand this off is back to Liza, because I think one of the benefits of ethnography is it allows us to really understand the context that people live in and how that affects, their personality. And we know it's not nature or nurture, it's both. And so Liza, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Kelly and how this played out for him.
Yeah, so Kelly was, for the most part, prevention oriented, especially once things promotion oriented, except for, when he started getting more more concerned about his health and the health of others. But he was able to find joy in having to cook for himself all the day. He said that going to the grocery store was a treasure hunt. He started trading up on certain ingredients because that was going to help sort of improve the cooking experience, and then of course the eating experience. So he was able to make everything positive, like Michael Scott. And he also, seeing as mindsets can shift based on a different situation, you can go from being promotion to prevention at some point during a day. When it came to BLM, he became really sort of prevention minded in certain respects. He was concerned about others. He did a lot of educating of himself. He went to the protests. He lost a lot of Facebook friends, but he didn't really speak publicly about it. So he had this mix of, keeping himself safe and other people safe and trying to make things equitable, and then, trying to make the most of a different horrible situation. So it was interesting as he went along the IPAC to see how those moments of promotion came through and then those aspects of prevention came through. And I just want to transition quickly into another sort of setup of this conflict between promotion and prevention in terms of masks, because you can see here that there were times that eventually he became far more dedicated to his mask use than he was initially. And more than anything, unsurprisingly, in this study, masks were the symbol, the signifier, but they were also a tool. They were also something that shielded those, especially like Regina or Bill, who were at high risk. Bill had a kidney transplant. Regina is a metastatic cancer patient. She needed to be shielded from danger when she would, once in a while, not often, leave her house. For others, this mask was an enabler, not shield, sorry, just noticed that. It enabled them to do the things that they wanted to do, but they were not necessarily happy about having to wear it. This sort of cohort of folks were, for the most part, more resistant to change. Many were our more conservative folks, but there was a deep contrast between folks who regarded mask use as something that would protect them and protect others. It was the shield. And then others who felt like it was this disdained something that they just really didn't want to put on, but allowed them to go do these things. And we have a video talking about that a bit. We weren't able to include everyone, but you'll meet a couple more people from the study. And one thing that cut in terms of symbol and signifier that I do want to mention is you'll see Bill, who is a 60-year-old African-American man, long dreads. He started off wearing more bandana style masks, but moved to what most people are using these days in terms of around the ear, because he felt like it was coming across as too intimidating or gave people the wrong impression of him. So, there are a lot of different nuances to how a mask enabled him to do, it allowed him to do certain things, but what other people read about him because of what he was wearing. I'm going to stop talking and go to the video. So hold on while I bring it up. It's about 2 minutes long, and then we'll bring this presentation home because I know we're running on time. So again, your sound should be coming from your speakers once we shift over.
I wear a mask because it's required by the law now to wear one. I never wore a mask until it was mandated.
Whenever I leave my apartment, I always make sure that I have my mask handy. It allows me to go to the grocery store, just get outside instead of being stuck inside and have some sense of security.
Downtown Disney was very big on the masks, and they kept getting on my nerves to the point where I was about ready to leave. Then again, I cooled down. They're trying to do what's right for the other people. I still hate them. I don't believe in the COVID-19, so I think it's just like I said, the flu bug.
To me, the mask is the norm. Matter of fact, the one that I had bought had broke. You know, I felt like it was a piece of my clothing, like I was walking in a place nude almost.
It annoys me that so many people don't wear a mask. I have worn a mask from the beginning of the pandemic. As a cancer patient, I can't take the chance of going out unprotected.
When it comes to face masks, I personally do not like them. I think they are very uncomfortable to wear for too long of a time. If you're out and about and you're thirsty, what you gotta do, take it off. You're immediately exposing yourself. No point in putting it back on.
I don't like seeing people not wear masks, especially indoors. Like in the supermarket, it's really annoying when someone just kind of like does this. I hate that so much. This is like my keys now. It's definitely a habit.
Wearing a mask is essential for me. I've worn it from the beginning. I wear it anytime I'm out and about. It's second nature at this point. It'll probably be odd when there comes a point when we don't. I'm not sure when that will ever be.
All right, so
I think that's a great lead-in into our next section, Liza, which is really about the habits, that people have formed during COVID. And clearly, mask wearing is something that I think, at least according to our own data, 85% of people have adopted pretty nicely most recently. But there were other things that we saw as well. And I think, one of them really relates to this timeline of habit disruption and kind of thinking about when people started new habits, when other habits were disrupted. And so, habits are made and broken during these moments of disruption. And we can think about, the normal ways in which this occurs. We go on a vacation, we're in a new grocery store, we try something new, or we're with new people, and so we decide we're going to try something new there, or it's our birthday, or it's New Year, so we're going to decide how to start eating healthier or engage in some new behaviors. So Liza, are you able to bring the deck back up?
Oh, are you not seeing it? Oh gosh, sorry.
But I think here, if we consider all of the micro disruptions that we've seen this year, we've had a ton of them, right? So lockdown being one, reopening being another, thinking about our second wave of spikes during early August, reopening again, and now even going back to school. And then certainly as we approach the holidays, that's going to be disruptive too, whether it's visiting with family, not visiting with family. Great article in the Times the other day about like, will people eat turkey anymore? And what will that look like? So even our most basic and fundamental rituals have been disrupted as a result of this. And when we think about kind of what's going to stick, what's not going to stick, we can think about the habits loop. And there's really three components. One is, what are the triggers that we have for our behavior? What are the behaviors? Are there barriers to them? And what are the rewards? And I think one of the most interesting things for us, as you can see here, was how people's rewards have shifted. And where we saw, I think, the most interesting things had been what was once a negative or an anti-reward or like a punishment turned into new positive rewards for people. So for Shamika, going to the store for her now became this moment of free time that she couldn't have, this new identity for her as she's able to kind of not be that caretaker for her entire family. For Jaron, the exercise, which he would dread, having to go spend those time and minutes on the bike, like he's jumping at the bit to go do that. Like, this gives me a break, this gives me alone time, this gives me a chance to refresh and reset. And even for Regina, who is very conservative, as you saw throughout this entire pandemic, the social connection, the break from the isolation that she was able to get from going out of the house was something that she didn't expect and was new to her. And so I think this gives us a really nice way of thinking, like even some of the negatives are now positives. Some of the positives might not exist anymore. And so as you think about your customers and your brands, what are the new values that they have? What are the new rewards that they're seeking? And if you go to the next slide, Liza, I think this gives us some really nice insight. When we're threatened, when we're under pressure, what do we focus on? We focus on what's close to us. And this has led to a recalibration of values among the people that we saw, a focus on our health, a focus on our families, our focus on our homes, even including our backyard, but really just understanding that there's meaning that we can get from our own lives that are not material as well. So certainly there were people reaching out to get that material satisfaction, but very much a recalibration towards what was accessible, what was safe, and where people wanted to be. So just going to the last part on this is, really understanding what's likely to stick here. And I think kind of 3 elements that we can consider are: how seamless is the behavior? Is it something that's truly new, or is it something that sort of fits into people's lives already? The second being repeatability. In order for a habit to stick, we have to have the opportunity to kind of do it over and over again, so it becomes a little bit automatic. Which of these events are one-off? Which of these are sort of systematic to the way that we now live? And then the final one really relates to kind of the rewards that we get. And I think one of the strongest rewards that people have is what we call a cognitive reward. I've learned something. I've become better as a result of doing something. And we know from psychology that when we are able to invest our own effort, we actually value the outcome better. It's called the IKEA effect. It's why we all move that bookcase 5 apartments, even though it's falling apart, right? We love it to death. But I think this is really kind of brings us into, what's next? How do we take this idea of where people's mindsets are, what's sticky, and then consider what should we do about it? So I'll hand it back over to you, Lessa.
Sure. So we saw a lot of behaviors that seem to stick, and we also want to bear in mind, are some of the beliefs that emerged or were always there going to stick as well? And Angela, who was our one Gen Z respondent from Washington, she'd always been a little unsure about government in terms of it serving its citizens the way that it should. She was fairly left in her political leanings, but her disillusionment just with society broadly grew as the pandemic response proved more disorganized and not unified across the nation, to the point that she has started to look for opportunities to move to South Korea and pursue a future there. So she's really starting to think about what's next, because she doesn't see a lot that's positive for her here, short, near, or far term. And then Eric, confirmation bias was really strong. He's the family we saw at Disney, thinks the virus is a hoax. He's been increasingly frustrated working his forklift at the warehouse. No one there is sick. They're all in each other's business. Everything's been blown out of proportion, and that's not going to change. That's going to stick with him for the duration. So we need to be aware of what is not going to change in terms of what people believe and what's motivating them these days. Some things that are a bit new that I think will stay is both the me and the we that emerged within our sample. Me being trying to take better care of myself, whether it was, protecting my immune system, some supplements, eating healthier, that diet that came and went, but just that renewed focus for Kelly in terms of well-being, the daily positive email that Violet would get. Everybody really thought about taking care of themselves a lot more than they used to, and they've had an opportunity in many cases to actually act upon that. And the we is finding new ways to connect with others, to make a better society for those who are very passionate about racial and societal justice. Wade is not traveling internationally the way that he had been. He's got family in Japan. He's trying to find new ways to stay in touch with people in other states and other countries around the world through digital tools, and then creating new ways to interact with them outside in a safe manner in Georgia. So next, I think, Jesse, you were going to take us through these 3 things.
Yeah, so I think in terms of what should we be doing? I think the first is it's a no-brainer, but it's important to say out loud, right? Your consumers have changed, your customers have changed. And so what are the new needs that they have, right? And this is not only in terms of abstract needs, but literally, we all wanted yeast at a moment, we all needed to upgrade our home offices. How are holidays going to be celebrated? What happens as we move forward? And then certainly, how have their mindset shifted? Are there certain ways that they're approaching your category, either in a system 1 or system 2 way, or even moments of the journey that have changed? And then are they looking at it through a prevention or a promotion mindset? I think the second area, related to this idea of uncertainty, kind of going back to Kelly's point even about not knowing what to do or not, if you go to the next slide, Liza, is provide certainty. Conspiracy theories are happening because people don't have an authoritative source of information. People are so exhausted from attending to what should I be doing, what's real, what's not real, that brands have an opportunity here to serve as a voice. And that's not only for public health concerns, but also as it relates to larger issues of social injustice, of class differences and inequality, and even kind of thinking about voting now and kind of the position that brands have taken there. So the more simple, the more directive, the more assertive we can even be, the better. And then finally, and I think that this is a key point, is now really is a key time to act. And so some great evidence from behavioral science has shown that when people experience a budgetary shortfall, they pare back their spending and they reprioritize where they want that spending to be. We know that people's values have shifted, so they've probably changed some of the ways that they're spending. Now, what's interesting is even when that money comes back to them, they don't go back to spending on the same categories, the same brands, the same products that they did before. And so really considering, how can I provide value now? What are the habits that people are positively engaging in that I can lean into? What are the ways that I can link up with their abstract values around health, around family, around connection and togetherness? And what are ways that I can make sure that I'm showing that I'm on their team right now? And I think being proactive about this is a really strong thing to do. If you look at some of the successes of the financial industry of being proactive with kind of mortgage forbearance and allowing people to be late on payments, this is what people need. People need action by brands right now to say, we support you, we understand your priorities, and we'll be here with you for the long term. So I know there were a number of phenomenal questions asked in the chat box. Thank you so much for your engagement. We're clearly a little bit over time, but Liza and I will follow up with you, and I'll hand it back over to you, Liza. Thank you, everybody. Not Liza, Ellen. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance today.
Thanks, everybody.
I just really want to thank Liza and Jesse for today's really interesting presentation and the videos that illustrated the broad range of perspectives out there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If we didn't get to your question, as Jesse said, you'll be receiving an email, and you will also receive an email with a direct link to today's recorded presentation. Please do reach out to us in the meantime. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.